Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025, episode 404, and we're going to talk about resetting perspective with better definitions. To be honest, I'm sort of kind of sick, bad cold, and my brain is not really functioning. So I'm just going to do a quick add-on addendum sort of episode to yesterday's episode. Yesterday we were talking about multiple perspectives by field of study, right? So philosophy, economics, mathematics, perhaps religion. So it's a variation, actually, of something I had said earlier, very early in the podcast when um, I basically said all the different departments were looking at the same thing. And when we describe what is being studied, you probably, chances are it would take a little while before you realize that you were all talking about the same object because the questions each department asks about whatever it is that they're studying are completely different. Right. Just as a review, if we were studying an object in the religion department, we would ask, what does it mean? What is its function? What did people do? Did people sacrifice animals to it or whatever? Things of that nature. And then if you go over to the physics department, you would ask questions like, what's its density, length, width, height? Uh, these kinds of questions. And so it would take a while if you were just reading the reports, the lab reports, or the papers. It would take a while before people would realize that we were studying the same thing. And yet, it's not that one or the other perspective is bad or less accurate. We're talking about the same object with a completely different subjective perspective. And so all of the different perspectives together help create a better understanding of what is being observed, whatever is being studied. And so that is not just something that can be done with physical objects, but we can do that with concepts as well, concepts and theories. So to build on that idea is to use the idea of definition. Now, I've talked about definitions in the context of deconstruction and also in a couple other episodes as well, but probably not focusing just simply on the idea of having better definitions in order to change perspective. So, if you think about it, our perspective is our perspective. In other words, if you're talking to someone who has never heard of the subjective professor or even has entertained the idea of competing subjectivities, then we just assume, most people assume that what they know is simply true. That's their perspective. And most people will be in the frame of mind that everyone else is observing the same exact phenomena in the way that they see it. And so it's very hard for people to try to come to terms or understand why different people looking at the same phenomena will come away with different interpretations. Right. And so our perspective is our perspective. It's very hard to change it, to improve it, to modify it in any way. But if we commit to the endeavor of trying to have better subjectivities, of increasing our knowledge and understanding, if we really commit to it and we're not afraid of what we might find, then resetting perspective through better definitions will be extremely helpful for you. It was extremely helpful for me. And so that's why I incorporated it, obviously, because it's my subjectivity in the framework that I use. So definitions most people don't really think about it these days, especially younger people teaching at the middle school, asking the kids to use a dictionary. They look at me like, uh, what's that? Yeah, It's odd because when I was their age, I was always using the dictionary, but it was a pain in the butt because the dictionaries are usually very, very large, and if you get a condensed dictionary, it doesn't have all the words. So it was kind of awkward to carry around and use. And nowadays, you have an online dictionary. It doesn't add any weight at all to you if you're already carrying a phone. But people don't use the dictionary, which is extremely problematic. So they're always going by assuming that they, from the context, what they know, what they sort of try to glean what the meaning is from the context. And I got to tell you that 60, 70% of the time, it's wrong. Or they read the word, they get a vibe, but they have no idea what it actually means. And this extends into reading comprehension. These days, anyone who's public school educated, there's no reading comprehension skills. And it's no wonder that a lot of people are homeschooling their children or supplementing their education somehow because reading comprehension is no longer a thing. I mentioned it before that I would read, I was getting a little suspicious, and so I would read several sentences from the assigned reading, and I would ask students, bright students, intelligent students, to use their words to explain what was just read. And not a single person, I'm not exaggerating at all, out of 50, 60 students, not a single one could summarize what we had just read. I mean, it's not even like they had to do for homework and I've said, what did it say? I read it in class and then I asked them to restate it in their own words and no one could do it, right? And so in my head, I was thinking, wow, something really is going on in the primary, secondary education level. And here I am. And yes, it starts really early. No one knows what they're reading. So they can read well, they read quickly, no comprehension at all. So we use words all the time. Now imagine those kids, they grow up and they're constantly using these words, or people are talking to them and they just pretend that they understand what is being spoken, but they have no idea what's being discussed. So we use words. We might even know what these words mean, but then the question arises, are we using the words in the same way that other people understand them? So I've used the word love, for example. That's pretty easy because there's a lot of comedy associated with the word love, right? So if two heterosexuals get together and they both say, I love you, and then pretty soon after, one person breaks up with the other. And then the question is asked, but you said you loved me. And then the one person says, yeah, I did say that, but it means I wanted to sleep with you. And the other person says, what? That's not what it means. And so that's a situation where, when I tell that story in college, they all laugh because it happens all the time. Two people using the same term in the same context and yet have completely different understandings of the word, expectations, etc. So, and I would always jokingly add that the next time things are getting hot and heavy and someone pulls out the L word, just say, time out. What do you mean by that? Can you give me a quick definition of how you're using that word? Everyone kind of laughs because it'll never happen. But at the same time, I'm hoping I'm planting a seed into their head to make them realize, oh, maybe they don't mean what I think it means. Maybe they're saying something else from their subjectivity. So what might that be? And I would always say it's your own self-protection to be able to ask someone to define a word like that. I've done this before on this channel and in class with words like fascist, Nazi, capitalism, freedom, wealth, greed, poverty. I mean, we can go on and on. But getting back to the point of subjectivity, depending on how you define that word, it actually does determine what you see. In other words, it signifies, the definition signifies, uh, what is important for us to be, for us to observe. I'm sorry, I just took some NyQuil and I think it's the effects are setting in. But it's like framing a shot for a picture, whether like a movie studio, you're framing the shot, even for a still image, right? Whatever's in the frame is seen, whatever is just outside of the frame, not seen. So I do this all the time. If I take a picture and there's a garbage can, I try to shift a little bit so that you don't see the garbage can. And so all you see is a beautiful landscape, right? And so the framing is very important, right? And we can conceptually frame through our definition. So your definition can either include or exclude details. And depending on what you're talking about, how you're talking about it, it could be extremely significant in the sense of getting it wrong. I've showed how this works with religion, right? Depending on how you define religion, you can exclude most beliefs or include them. And so, depending on what your agenda is, you can exclude certain things for your advantage or to disadvantage certain people. Love, I've just did it again. And to take another step, if you have listened to my sermons, whenever we talk about God's love, most people want to go the emotional route, but I've introduced the concept of emotion has no knowledge, it's all feeling. So, what's the opposite extreme? It's all knowledge, no feeling. So you can go on that spectrum and try to understand what God is saying or scripture is saying about love, or you do what I always say, which is that love is actually the character of God, which is uh, truth, right? It's order, it's the law. And so when there is love, there is law. So you can't express love when you when you transgress laws. So you can't say, I love you so much, I'm going to murder you. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because, right, it goes against what most people would understand love to be. And so I don't go into the emotional aspect at all, which muddies, the discussion on love. I just simply say, love is law, right? And so either your law is good or it's not. Greed, I've done this before. Most people will understand greed to be, uh, so by the definition, then it shifts our focus, right? So if you're reading scripture and you want to say that love is all emotion, then you're tapping into what you want it to be, which is full of contradiction, which full of a lot of confusion, right? A lot of hypocrisy as well. And so then people read that into the nature and character of God, and it becomes easy, right, to refute whatever is being said about God, or to say, well, see, that's how, difficult it is to explain or understand. But we're trying to bring God, or what's the scripture, God of scripture, to our level of emotion, which is basically no knowledge and information. Right. And so if you shift it and say love, no, love is law, it changes everything. Right. Now you're having a completely different discussion. And then everything, all those feels comes out of a lot of it is socialization, a lot of it comes from our understanding. And so when your understanding changes, then hopefully the emotions and your emotional reactions and your socialized habitual reactions and emotions will also change, follow, and keep up with your increasing body of knowledge. Then there's greed. Most people understand it to be, wanting more than you need, but need is subjective. So according to whose need, right? A business person's need or a child's need, right? And so this is what's kind of weird about, having a definition that's so vague. And so I basically say that everyone is greedy, if you think about it, wanting more than what you have right now. And I've given examples by saying that you can only call someone who has more than you greedy. You can't look at someone who has less than you and call them greedy because then that makes you greedy automatically. So all greed is a pejorative, right? You're identifying someone that you're jealous of because they have more than you. So they're greedy. Well, it's a nonsense, right? You don't get any information from the word greed. So all of us are greedy. We see someone who has more than us and we're like, wow, that person is a little bit greedy, you know? So it's a meaningless term. It's a term of jealousy, really. And once you look at it that way, then greed can be a good thing, right? Oh, I want that too. What do I need to do to get that? I have to work more. I have to get more education. I have to get more training. I need more experience. I need to be more responsible, right? And so in that way, greed becomes a positive thing, right? It motivates people to have to do more, become more productive. And if the idea of love is still strong in society, then you have to be lawful. You can't cheat people. You can't betray people. You can't, right, stab people in the back. You can't do these things, right, and be successful. To do all of that other thing, you'll one day have a problem with the law or with people who want to work with you. You won't be able to find anyone who's willing to work with you. So and so on. That's how it goes. So when you change your definition, you change what is being seen and observed, what is on the table to be analyzed. One final one, and then then I'm going to cut out. But war, think about it. And I brought this up with Sun Tzu's Art of War. How can war be art? Right. I would ask that in class, and people would kind of look at me and say, "Yeah, that, but Asians are weird." But I would say, no. If you think about it, and if you read the text carefully, war is not just violence, bloody conflict, stabbing, cutting, chopping. No, that's not what it is. If you look closely, war is competition. And if you conduct your competition lawfully, right, according to the rules, then there are ways to avoid the violence. You can have the competition without the violence. And Sun Tzu, he emphasizes that avoiding the physical destructive aspect of war and keeping it at a bloodless competition is much better for society, right? So instead of diverting resources, life, energy to killing each other, directed in a way where you maintain peace, cooperation, and then you have peace as a result. So once you look at it in terms of competition, war as a competition, then everything, it's not just what's happening in Ukraine, for example, is war, but also what's happening politically here in the United States is a war as well, not only between the two, the pseudo war between the two political major parties here in the United States, but also the conflict between the deep state and citizens. Uh, you know, that becomes also a possible potential object of studying in the context of war. And once you bring in all these other aspects of what war could be, aka competition, then you can start to study dynamics of war, right? Successful war, greater outcomes and implications and consequences of war. And that becomes a much fuller picture of wars. And so when you see a title like "War is a Racket" or "The First Casualty of War is the Truth," when you see expressions like this, there's a greater understanding of what it's actually trying to convey. Right. And so this is another way to shift your subjectivity to have access to more information. So last time I talked about using a different field of study to have access to different questions, different ways of analyzing information and data. right? So there's that. So studying the same things that we study in the religion department from the political science department or from the physics department or the math department. Like, what do they say about the same concept? And then today is, oh, okay, so maybe you don't have time, or maybe you're unfamiliar with philosophy or, ethics or, science. Well, okay, then look at the definitions. And that would also be a way to access more information. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope that my nasally voice didn't put you off too much. But I will talk to you soon, and hopefully I'll be over this cold even sooner. Talk to you next time.